January 17, 1943. Tokyo. The mahogany table gleams under harsh electric lights in the Imperial Navy's intelligence briefing room. Steam rises from cups of green tea, untouched and growing cold. Admiral Koshiro Oikawa adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses, studying the reconnaissance photographs spread before him like scattered leaves of doom. The images show American shipyards from above. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, Electric Boat Company in Groton, Mare Island. But these aren't the facilities Japanese intelligence remembered from 1941. Where once stood modest construction bays now sprawl massive industrial complexes. Submarine hulls line the waterfront in mathematical precision, dozens upon dozens, their steel frames catching Pacific sunlight. Commander Yamamoto Isoroku leans forward, his finger tracing the outline of what appears to be 17 submarines in various stages of completion at a single yard. "Impossible," he whispers in Japanese. "They cannot build this fast." But the photographs don't lie. America has transformed its submarine production into something the Japanese Empire never anticipated, an industrial avalanche that would reshape the entire Pacific War. 2 years earlier, submarine warfare existed as a gentleman's game of chess played beneath Pacific waves. Both Japan and America possessed respectable underwater fleets. Japan's I-class boats were technological marvels, long-range predators designed for reconnaissance and surprise attacks. America's fleet submarines, while fewer in number, carried superior radar and sonar systems. The balance seemed manageable, predictable even. Pearl Harbor shattered that illusion. On December 7, 1941, as Japanese carrier planes reduced Battleship Row to twisted metal and billowing smoke, Admiral Chester Nimitz received a stark reality check. The Pacific Ocean had become a Japanese lake overnight. From Wake Island to the Philippines, from Hong Kong to Singapore, the rising sun's naval forces dominated waters that stretched across 1/3 of Earth's surface. America's surface fleet lay crippled in Hawaiian waters, and Japanese admirals calculated they had perhaps 18 months before American industrial might could respond meaningfully. They were wrong about the timeline, but correct about one thing: America's response would be industrial. President Franklin Roosevelt understood that winning a Pacific war required more than courage or tactical brilliance. It demanded submarines, and lots of them. The vast distances between islands, the need to strangle Japanese supply lines, the impossibility of matching Japan's initial naval superiority, all pointed toward underwater warfare as America's best hope. But in early 1942, the United States Navy possessed only 51 submarines suitable for Pacific operations. Japan had over 60, with more under construction. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. America needed to build submarines faster than any nation had ever built them before. Roosevelt turned to the one resource that had transformed America from colonial backwater to industrial giant: American manufacturing ingenuity. The submarine building program that emerged would become one of World War II's most crucial yet overlooked campaigns, a race against time fought not with torpedoes and depth charges, but with rivets, steel, and human determination. The transformation began in shipyards that had never seen a submarine. Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, had built submarines since 1899, but at peacetime's leisurely pace, perhaps 4 boats annually. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire possessed similar capabilities. Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California focused primarily on surface vessels. These facilities represented America's entire submarine construction capacity in 1941. Capable of producing maybe 15 submarines per year under optimal conditions. Japan was sinking American merchant vessels faster than that. The War Production Board, led by Donald Nelson, attacked this bottleneck with characteristic American audacity. Instead of expanding existing facilities incrementally, they decided to reinvent submarine construction entirely. New shipyards would rise from empty fields. Existing yards would triple their capacity. Most revolutionary of all, submarines would be built using mass production techniques pioneered by Henry Ford's automobile assembly lines. This decision horrified naval traditionalists. Submarines were precision instruments, they argued, requiring months of careful craftsmanship. Each boat was unique, hand-fitted by skilled artisans who understood the deadly intricacies of underwater warfare. Mass production might work for tanks or aircraft, but not for vessels that would dive 300 feet beneath hostile seas with 80 men inside. The traditionalists were overruled. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, understood that perfect submarines delivered too late were worthless. America needed good submarines delivered quickly, and lots of them. The industrial mobilization that followed transformed the American workforce as profoundly as it transformed American shipyards. Women who had never touched welding equipment learned to join steel plates with surgical precision. Farmers from the Midwest relocated to coastal cities, trading plowshares for riveting guns. Retired craftsmen returned to work, teaching assembly line techniques to teenagers who had never seen the ocean. By mid-1942, American shipyards operated around the clock. Floodlights turned night into day as 3 shifts of workers maintained continuous production schedules. The sounds of American submarine construction, hammering, welding, the groaning of massive cranes, never stopped. This industrial symphony would soon reach crescendos that Japanese intelligence found impossible to believe. The human transformation proved as remarkable as the industrial one. At Electric Boat's Groton facility, Rosie the Riveter became Rosa the Submarine Builder. Women comprised nearly 40% of the workforce by 1943, performing tasks previously reserved for men with decades of shipbuilding experience. Mary Patsavis, a former department store clerk from New London, learned to weld submarine pressure hulls in 6 weeks. Her precision rivaled veteran craftsmen, and her speed exceeded theirs. Stories like Mary's multiplied across American shipyards as ordinary citizens discovered extraordinary capabilities within themselves. The technological innovations were equally impressive. Traditional submarine construction required building each boat from the keel up, a process that took 14 months. American engineers redesigned this entirely, creating modular construction systems where major submarine components could be built simultaneously in different parts of the shipyard, then assembled like enormous 3-dimensional puzzles. The submarine's engine room could be completed while the forward torpedo room was still being welded. Hull sections were prefabricated in standardized segments, allowing multiple submarines to share identical components. Standardization reduced construction time from 14 months to 6 months, then to 4 months. By 1944, some American shipyards were launching completed submarines every 3 weeks. The financial commitment was staggering. In 1942, America spent more money on submarine construction than Japan spent on its entire navy. The Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company in Wisconsin, a facility that had never built military vessels, received contracts worth more than some small nations' annual budgets. They constructed submarines 1,500 miles from the nearest ocean, then transported the completed boats through the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. The sight of submarines being towed past Illinois cornfields became one of the war's most surreal images. Quality control presented the greatest challenge. Traditional submarine construction allowed for extensive testing and refinement. Each boat was essentially a prototype. Mass production demanded consistent quality across hundreds of identical vessels. American industry responded with innovations that would influence manufacturing for decades. Statistical quality control, pioneered by Walter Schuhart at Bell Laboratories, was applied to submarine construction for the first time. Every weld was tested, every component measured, every system verified against rigorous standards. The result was submarines that were not only built faster than ever before, but were also more reliable than their handcrafted predecessors. From Japanese intelligence headquarters in Tokyo, these developments appeared incomprehensible. Colonel Hideaki Mizutani, Chief of American Industrial Intelligence, received reports that seemed like fantasy fiction. American shipyards were supposedly completing submarines in 4 months. Multiple facilities were launching boats simultaneously. The numbers simply didn't add up according to Japanese understanding of industrial capacity. Mizutani's agents infiltrated American shipyards when possible, photographed facilities from offshore, and intercepted radio communications. Every intelligence source confirmed the impossible. America was building submarines at rates that defied Japanese military calculations. The strategic implications were devastating. Japan's entire Pacific strategy depended on controlling sea lanes with surface vessels and maintaining local submarine superiority around captured territories. If America could flood Pacific waters with submarines, Japanese supply lines would become indefensible. Every merchant vessel carrying oil from the Dutch East Indies, every transport bringing reinforcements to island garrisons, every naval task force moving between bases would face constant underwater threat. Japanese naval planners had anticipated American submarine attacks, but calculated they could manage perhaps 100 American boats spread across the vast Pacific. Intelligence reports suggested America might field 3 times that number. The psychological impact on Japanese naval leadership was profound. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, had famously warned that Japan could run wild for 6 months to a year, but thereafter faced uncertain prospects against American industrial might. His timeline was proving optimistic. American submarine production represented more than manufacturing prowess. It demonstrated a fundamental difference in how the two nations approached warfare. Japan built exquisite individual weapons with careful craftsmanship and attention to honor. America built adequate weapons in overwhelming quantities with ruthless efficiency. The contrast reflected deeper cultural differences about warfare, sacrifice, and victory. Japanese submarines were technological masterpieces, but America was building a technological tidal wave. The moral dimensions were equally complex. American submarine crews, many barely out of high school, would soon patrol Pacific waters in boats built by their neighbors, welded by their girlfriends, financed by their grandparents' war bonds. The entire American home front was literally invested in submarine warfare. This connection between industrial production and combat effectiveness created a unity of purpose that Japan, despite its martial traditions and emperor worship, struggled to match. Every American submarine that slipped beneath Pacific waves carried with it the hopes, fears, and determination of an entire society committed to victory through industrial supremacy. The moment of recognition came during the summer of 1943. Japanese submarine I-21, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Matsuo Kanji, surfaced off the California coast on a reconnaissance mission. Through his periscope, Kanji observed Mare Island Naval Shipyard during what intelligence reports later described as peak construction frenzy. What he saw redefined Japanese understanding of American capabilities. 7 submarines were under construction simultaneously in a single facility. Not 7 submarines in various stages of planning and early construction. 7 boats with visible hull plating, superstructures, and conning towers. 3 appeared nearly complete. The mathematics were impossible according to Japanese projections, yet undeniable according to Kanji's direct observation. His radio report to Tokyo used words like forest of submarines and impossible construction rates. Admiral Koga Mineichi, commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, initially dismissed the report as reconnaissance error or American deception. Submarines could not be built that quickly, and certainly not in such quantities. Additional intelligence reports forced recognition of a new reality. By August 1943, American shipyards were launching submarines faster than Japan could count them. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard completed USS Piper on August 28, just 4 months and 12 days after her keel was laid. Electric Boat launched USS Queenfish on November 30th, setting new speed records for submarine construction. Manitowoc Shipbuilding, the Wisconsin facility that had never seen salt water until 1942, delivered USS Robalo in September 1943, ahead of schedule and under budget. The production statistics were staggering. In 1943 alone, American shipyards launched 77 submarines. Japan managed 14. The gap was widening monthly as American production accelerated while Japanese facilities struggled with material shortages and bombing raids. More alarming for Japanese planners was the quality of American submarines. Early war American boats had suffered from torpedo problems and mechanical failures. The mass-produced submarines of 1943 incorporated solutions to these problems, standardized improvements, and enhanced capabilities. They were not just more numerous, they were better. The turning point crystallized during a November 1943 Imperial Navy staff meeting in Tokyo. Intelligence officers presented photographic evidence from multiple sources showing American submarine production at levels Japanese industry could never match. Admiral Koga faced a strategic reality that invalidated fundamental assumptions about Pacific warfare. America was not simply replacing Pearl Harbor losses, they were building naval superiority through industrial supremacy. The psychological impact on Japanese naval leadership was immediate and profound. Conversations recorded by Japanese staff officers revealed the depth of their shock. How do they build so many? Became a recurring question in Tokyo planning sessions. The answer lay in American industrial philosophy that Japanese military culture found difficult to comprehend. America had transformed submarine construction from craftsmanship to manufacturing, from art to science, from individual excellence to collective efficiency. The strategic recalculations were swift and brutal. Japanese convoy routes across the Pacific, previously manageable with existing naval escorts, now faced submarine threats that could overwhelm defensive capabilities. Oil tankers from Borneo, transport ships from Manila, even military vessels moving between bases would encounter American submarines in numbers that Japanese anti-submarine warfare could not handle. Admiral Koga ordered immediate changes to Japanese naval strategy. Convoy schedules were altered to avoid predicted American submarine patrol areas. Merchant vessel construction was accelerated to replace anticipated losses. Most significantly, Japanese submarine deployment shifted from offensive operations to defensive patrols protecting home waters and vital supply lines. The initiative in Pacific submarine warfare had passed irreversibly to the United States. By December 1943, American submarines were already demonstrating their growing numerical advantage. USS Wahoo, under Commander Dudley Morton, sank 4 Japanese vessels in a single patrol. USS Silversides destroyed 6 ships during November operations. USS Tang began a legendary career that would see her sink more enemy tonnage than any other American submarine. These weren't isolated successes, they represented systematic pressure applied by growing numbers of American submarines across ex-pays, ending areas of Pacific Ocean. Japanese merchant marine losses accelerated correspondingly. November 1943 saw 47 Japanese vessels sunk by American submarines, the highest monthly total to date. December was worse. The trend was clear and terrifying for Japanese logistics planners. American submarine production was translating directly into Japanese shipping losses, creating a death spiral that threatened Japan's ability to maintain its Pacific empire. The final recognition came in January 1944, when Japanese intelligence estimated that American shipyards would launch over 100 submarines during the coming year. Combined with boats already in service, this would give America numerical submarine superiority approaching 3-1 by year's end. No defensive strategy could compensate for such overwhelming numbers. Japan's Pacific War had become a race against American industrial capacity, and Japan was losing decisively. The consequences unfolded with mathematical precision across Pacific battlefields. By mid-1944, American submarines operated in Pacific waters with a freedom that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. Japanese convoy routes that had once carried steady streams of oil, food, and military supplies became underwater graveyards patrolled by American submarines whose numbers seemed to multiply with each passing month. The statistics tell the story of industrial warfare's decisive impact. In 1944, American submarines sank 603 Japanese merchant vessels totaling 2.7 million tons of shipping. These weren't just numbers. Each sunk ship represented oil that never reached Japanese refineries, rice that never fed Japanese soldiers, ammunition that never reached Pacific garrisons. Japan's empire began starving from within as American submarine production translated into effective naval blockade. The human cost was enormous on both sides. Japanese merchant sailors faced odds that worsened monthly as American submarine numbers increased. Survival rates on Pacific convoy runs dropped below 50% by late 1944. American submarine crews, many serving in boats built by neighbors and friends back home, experienced combat stress intensified by the knowledge that their vessels represented the hopes and investments of entire communities. The boats themselves exceeded all expectations. Mass-produced American submarines of 1944 demonstrated reliability rates superior to their handcrafted predecessors. Standardized components meant repairs could be completed quickly at any American base. Identical training systems meant crews could transfer between boats without adjustment periods. The industrial approach to submarine construction had produced not just quantity, but sustainable quality that Japanese craftsman-built submarines could not match. Japanese naval leadership faced strategic choices that offered no good options. Diverting warships to convoy escort duty weakened offensive capabilities needed for major naval battles. Maintaining aggressive fleet operations left convoys vulnerable to submarine attacks that were becoming impossible to prevent. The industrial mathematics were inexorable. America was building submarines faster than Japan could build escort vessels, and the gap widened continuously. By 1945, the transformation was complete and devastating. American submarines controlled Pacific sea lanes with authority that made Japanese naval movement an exercise in survival rather than strategy. The submarines that had seemed impossible to Japanese intelligence officers in 1943 now prowled Pacific waters in numbers that exceeded even American pre-war projections. The final accounting reveals the scope of American industrial achievement. Between 1941 and 1945, American shipyards completed 288 submarines. Japan managed 126 during the same period, despite starting the war with superior facilities and experienced workforce. The American advantage was not just numerical, it was categorical. American submarines incorporated radar, sonar, and communication systems that Japanese boats lacked. More importantly, American submarine crews received continuous training and replacement, while Japanese submarine forces were worn down by combat losses that could not be replaced quickly enough. The strategic impact extended beyond submarine warfare itself. Japanese naval planners, forced to assume American submarine presence in virtually all Pacific waters, could no longer move naval forces with confidence. Fleet movements required extensive escort provisions. Merchant shipping became so hazardous that many routes were abandoned entirely. Japan's Pacific Empire, conquered through naval superiority, was being strangled by American naval production. The economic consequences for Japan were catastrophic. Oil imports dropped to 20% of pre-war levels. Food shortages affected military units throughout the Pacific. Industrial production declined as raw materials could not reach Japanese factories safely. The submarine blockade, enabled by American industrial capacity, was as effective as any direct military assault on Japanese territory. American submarine production had achieved something that Japanese military planners had considered impossible in 1941. It had turned the Pacific Ocean from a Japanese lake into an American hunting ground. The submarines built in Wisconsin cornfields and Connecticut shipyards, welded by former store clerks and assembled by teenagers, had become the instruments of Japanese defeat. Industrial capacity, transformed into naval capability, had proven decisive in Pacific warfare. The stunned Japanese generals examining reconnaissance photographs in that Tokyo briefing room had witnessed more than American industrial capacity. They had seen the future of warfare itself. These submarines, streaming from American shipyards, represented a fundamental shift in how nations would compete for global dominance. Victory would belong not to the most courageous warriors or the most brilliant tacticians, but to the societies that could transform their entire populations into instruments of production. The lesson extended far beyond World War II's Pacific theater. The Cold War's nuclear submarine fleets, built using techniques pioneered during wartime submarine production, would patrol oceans for decades. Modern naval warfare would be shaped by industrial capacity rather than maritime tradition. The photographs that so shocked Japanese intelligence officers in 1943 foretold a world where manufacturing prowess determined military outcomes. America's submarine factories had demonstrated that democracy, properly mobilized, possessed industrial advantages that authoritarian societies struggled to match. The women welding submarine hulls, the farmers building boats far from any ocean, the communities investing in war bonds, they represented collective determination that Japan's military culture, for all its honor and sacrifice, could not replicate. The submarines themselves have long since been scrapped or converted to museum displays, but their legacy endures in the recognition that modern warfare is ultimately decided in factories rather than on battlefields. The Japanese generals who studied those impossible photographs had glimpsed the industrial future, where victory belongs to the nation that can build the tools of war faster than enemies can count them.